Professor Paul Axel Naess. He's a senior consultant in the Department of Traumatology and in the Department of Pediatric Surgery at the Oslo University Hospital in Oslo, Norway. He's also a professor of traumatology at the University of Oslo and a former chief of traumatology with the rank of colonel in the Norwegian Armed Forces Medical Services. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Paul Axel Naess.
Norway is a peaceful country. However, when we started to formalize the Department of Traumatology at Oslo University Hospital nearly 2 decades ago, disaster preparedness was one of the issues we paid attention. And we had a lot of inputs from reports from previous MCIs worldwide, especially these 3 terrorist attacks got much attention, and we learned a lot from them. The New York terrorist attacks in 2001, the bomb explosions in Madrid in 2004, and the London bombings the year after, July 7. And based on all the information in these reports, there are many axioms that we can think that we can serve as a basis for institutional management planning. And these axioms are, it's extremely important to get information from scene. There will probably be few severely injured, might be a lot of killed people, and a lot of walking wounded, but it's extremely important to keep the walking wounded away from the emergency department. It's important to avoid the bottlenecks within the institution. Triage at the gate and re-triage within the institution later on is extremely important. And it's also wise to split surgical command. One consultant is not capable of actually being in total control. Robust communication lines are, of course, vital. Minimal acceptable care in a MCI is important, but that's not a static situation. You have to actually play this, during the event based on patient inflow and available resources in hospital. Trauma competent staff is always limited, and partly due to that, do not send the surgeon to the scene. They should be in their normal environment within the hospital. Transfusion demands are almost always moderate. It's important to start the registration immediately. Try to be at the top of the situation. Put some of your personnel to register during the event. It's important to start planning for the next days, and some patients will need many visits to the OR. And what was stated in all the previous reports is that it's important that you publish your data so that other institutions can learn from what you experienced. So back to the event, July 22nd in 2011, 3:26 in the afternoon, a bomb explosion took place in the governmental quarter downtown Oslo, capital of Norway. The explosion was so massive that it was actually the exact location was difficult to locate, and whether it was inside or outside this building was mysterious, at least for the first few hours. In such a situation, it's extremely important that they start triaging at the scene, and the important question is whether this patient is severely injured or not, because based on that, triage should take place. And as in the situation back on the 22nd of July, you need to have plans in advance. This is actually a walk-in clinic downtown used to take care of minor incidents, and nearly 100 people were triaged from the pre-hospital medical crews down to this clinic, and there was actually no under triage of these patients. The trauma center is situated only 10 minutes away from the explosion area, and the red alarm was activated at 3:46, 20 minutes after the incident took place. Then, within the first 15 minutes, the emergency department was emptied due to disaster management plans. Within 45 minutes, 14 staffed ventilator beds was up and running. After triage at the scene, the first potentially severely injured patient came in after 20 minutes, and within the next 19 minutes, 7 patients came in. Then we actually have a potential problem, because in a disaster situation or in an MCI situation, we only have 6 acute care beds for trauma victims. So then you need to be efficient. As you can see from this timeline, the time the first victims spent in the emergency department in red here is only a few minutes. And that's important because you need to create new beds for upcoming cases. And at the beginning, we had no clue how many patients that would arrive in our emergency department. And that's the reason why we deferred some of the surgery until we had more reliable information from the scene. CT scan was restricted in the emergency department only to patients with suspected severe head injuries might in need of acute neurosurgery. At the end of the day, we got only 10 patients from the bomb explosion in the government quarter. They underwent 39 the surgical procedures the first night. Again, minimum acceptable care and institutional damage control resuscitation line is important, so that you actually are at the top of the situation at any time. You need to have something, so to say, in your pocket if another victim with the life-threatening injuries comes in. Dual surgical command was established. One senior consultant was in charge of triage, resource control and communication with scene, and the other senior consultant took responsibility for supervision of treatment and use of key trauma personnel in the emergency department, and later on in the OR to supervise the surgical teams there. We had a lot of personnel coming in, although it was a Friday within the holiday season in Norway. But we kept them because we had limited information from the scene. At that time, rumors about a shooting spree at Utøya, an island 40 kilometers northwest of Oslo, took place. Was actually a youth camp there with many hundreds adolescents on that island, only accessible by a ferry. And within an hour, the rumors were actually verified as being a dramatic shooting spree. The terrorist killed 68 persons on scene, shot more than 120 persons in total. Evacuation was difficult because I had to go by boat. And as you can see on this map, Utøya is situated here. The nearest hospital is a smaller local hospital at Ringerike, but that's in the opposite direction of the trauma center situated here in the center of Oslo. There were challenges because there was construction work on the main road from Utøya to Oslo. So most of the transportation to the trauma center had to go by air. A total of 61 casualties came to hospital from Utøya, and 21 of these patients were triaged to be in need of the competency at the trauma center. And again, same evening, here you can see the patients arriving the first night from Utøya. They spend, again, very short time in the emergency department. Many of these patients went directly to the OR because they were in need of immediate surgery. And again, CT scan was restricted only to patients with suspected head injuries in need of neurosurgical intervention. We had a maximum of 6 operating rooms at the same time. We had actually a total of 6 ORs in shape. 16 patients underwent surgery the third night, and a total of 40 hours of surgical activity there. As you can see from this slide, there were a lot of surgical procedures involving most of the specialties in our trauma center. When we look back, we might were too restrictive. Some of the surgical procedures were actually deferred to the next day, but that was also again due to the fact that we didn't know at that stage how many casualties the trauma center would receive. Surge capacity was not restricted by rooms or available staff at any time point. Here you can see the patient flow in the surgical ICU and postoperative care unit. As you can see, non-trauma patients were evacuated, first from the PACU, then later on from the surgical ICU to other ICUs within the hospital trust. And then we had an increasing amount of patients from the terrorist attacks. But on no time, there were lack of ICU beds. Transfusion demands were actually moderate, as you can see here. 13 out of the 25 patients the first night needed transfusion. Massive transfusion protocol was activated in 7 patients, but the total usage of blood products was 53 units of PRBCs, 39 units of fresh frozen plasma, and 14 units of platelets. Problem in Norway, as in many other countries, is of course to keep on with the continuity when you have such an inflow of patients. We had multidisciplinary meetings in the morning and in the afternoon during the weekend. It was a massive workload over the first 3 weeks. But we were able to actually foresee that whenever a patient came into a second or a third surgical repair, at least one of the surgeons in the previous operation were present. In many respects, we felt that we had an ideal world, and this was partly because of the health authorities helping us with the temporary relocation of non-trauma surgical emergencies to other hospitals within the capital or close nearby. Due to that, we were able to do daytime priority to these trauma victims in the OR. We had an enormous support from our psychosocial teams, took care of the families to the victims, and at the later stage also to the victims themselves. Rehabilitation plans were initiated at an early stage, and these victims were given full support from day one. This table shows actually the total burden of work during the first 4 weeks. I think it's important to see what's in the yellow bracket, that within the first 4 weeks, we had 125 OR sessions and 431 OR hours spent on these patients. So, what did we learn? Actually, we didn't learn anything new. We didn't or invent the wheel. We maybe just reinvented part of it. It's extremely important to get information from scene. Triage and re-triage within the hospital, it's extremely important, because what you can see on scene is just based on 15-20 seconds examination, and the condition of the patient can change during transportation or even after the patient is admitted within the hospital. Dual or split surgical command is extremely important. Minimum acceptable care, again, it's vital, but you need information from the scene. You need to have available resources, and you have to play them as well as possible. And the trauma competent staff was limited and will always be limited, and you have to use them as efficient as possible. You should start planning for the next day immediately, because after the first 5-6 hours, people are tired. You have to plan, you have to send people back, you have to make schedules so that they will come back at the appropriate times. You should evaluate and publish your data, and you need to have a media strategy. This is from the first night. The Prime Minister of Norway came to the hospital. He was actually familiar with many of the victims, and you need to have a media strategy so that you don't say anything that can be questioned later on. And this is actually Dr. Garter and myself on day 6 after yet another press conference where we actually were rather tired of denying to give details on an individual basis, but again stressing that we are in control of the situation, people are being taken care of, and so forth. There will always be investigations after such episodes, and if you have been able to create data during the episode, then you can actually answer the questions from the interrogation and be passed based on that. And as a second consequence of that, if you have data, then you can evaluate your own performance, and you should publish the data so that the other can actually have knowledge from your experience. Again, it's important to remember that although you plan for almost everything, something unexpected can happen, like internal telephone lines will break down. Pen and paper is underestimated, should always be in place. And in Norway, on a Friday night, the hospital kitchen is of course closed, so then you need to have access to catering firms so that you can get pizza or other food to the personnel working. I just want to end my lecture with stating that the key factor to success in an MVI is what you do on a daily basis within a trauma system. Thank you for the attention.